Jack Smith submits a response. Donald Trump wanted to hold him in contempt, says Judge Chutkan should schedule an order to show cause, drag his butt into court, and ask him, Jack, why do you keep filing motions? Why do you keep sending in disclosure notices? Why do you keep prosecuting the case when Judge Chutkan said the case is on stay? It's being held in abeyance while the case is on appeal. Well, Jack Smith says, I'm not doing anything wrong. I want this trial to really happen on March 4th, which is when it's already scheduled for, and those dates are being held in abeyance, and he's just keeping the train on the tracks. Jack Smith just keeps working. And Trump says, I can't be in two places at the same time, okay? I'm up here in the Court of Appeals, and by law, this lower level court literally no longer has jurisdiction over the case. So why is Jack Smith continuing to violate Judge Chutkan's order? We read through the full motion from Donald Trump asking Judge Chutkan to be holding Jack Smith in contempt. We covered that in a prior video. Now, this is the response from Jack Smith. A 3-pager, not too long. He says, all right, Judge Chutkan and Donald Trump. They say this is the government's opposition to Trump's motion to hold Jack Smith in contempt and to issue an order to show cause. And the order to show cause is just like, come to the principal's office, please. Go back to the judge. Judge says, what did you do, son? Oh, no, I didn't light that on fire. I have no idea who did. I don't know how it got that way. No, I don't know. Ask Timmy. So here, they say here, Jack Smith responding writes, all right, Judge Chutkan. Donald Trump claims that the government intentionally violated your stay order and that we promoted a political agenda by fulfilling, says Jack, our continuing discovery obligations and by voluntarily complying with the otherwise suspended deadlines. And that's nice that they admit that it's suspended. Like, thank you for admitting that. Yes, that's true. They are suspended. But they say that is false. We're not doing that. The government has not violated and never intentionally would violate, because Trump was not happy in the last one. And rightfully so. It's like, what are these guys doing? They're filing motions in limine and all this stuff. Do you want Trump to respond to that? We would never do it. Violate an order of the court. Oh, here we go. And Trump's recycled allegations of partisanship and prosecutorial misconduct remain, here comes your government word, baseless. Everything's baseless. They say Trump's motion for an order to show cause should be denied, and we should not be called to the principal's office. On December 13th, writes Jack, the court, Chutkan, issued an order explaining Trump's pending interlocutory appeal. Okay, he's up at the Court of Appeals challenging the immunity provision, saying that it automatically stays, this is Chutkan writing, automatically stays any further proceedings that would move this case towards trial or impose additional burdens of litigation on the defendant. Okay, so when Jack Smith takes over his 10,000 pages, or let's say 1 million pages, I mean, there's like 14 million pages of discovery, I don't know. When he takes those and puts them in a giant wheelbarrow and dumps them on Trump's front yard, his attorneys say, we're not taking that crap. Get it off my lawn. We don't want it. But Jack Smith keeps dumping it on there. And they're saying, we cannot accept your paperwork because we're on appeal. But they say that that's okay for them. They say for clarity, they also stayed the deadlines and the proceedings as amended. Now, here's what Jack Smith says. And so even though you wrote that says anything that imposes additional burdens of litigation on the defendant, okay, like that's pretty obvious there. What do you think additional disclosure does? Well, you have to read it. So that's a burden of litigation. But here's what Jack says. The government does not understand your order to prohibit either party from voluntarily complying with the pretrial order or to countermand the government's, quote, continuing duty to disclose. So he's like, well, the rules say, oh my gosh, it's hysterical. Jack Smith says, yeah, but the rules say, you're like, oh gosh. Okay, so he cites the federal rules of criminal procedure that the duty to disclose is ongoing, which is a true rule, but it's not relevant here. It's like, yes, Jack, you have an obligation to continue to gather disclosure. And when you knew information like that Cassidy Hutchinson is allegedly fibbing about certain things, in my opinion. So like when you get disclosures that your witnesses are not good, yeah, you have an ongoing duty to disclose that stuff. But that doesn't mean you have a duty to drop the wheelbarrows off on their front yard, okay? But they're citing, it's like grasping at straws. Now, before the stay order was issued, says Jack, in a pleading acknowledging that Trump's interlocutory appeal automatically stayed the case, the government informed the court that the government would voluntarily comply with the adjourned deadlines. They say to help ensure that the trial proceeds promptly, because that's what this is all about. If the Court of Appeals, I think that the Court of Appeals is not going to dismiss Trump's case. They'll send it back down. Trump will then ultimately appeal it to the Supreme Court. I don't think it's going to come back anywhere close to March. Like, this trial is not going to stay for March, but they wanted to very badly. So if it did, let's say, for example, hypothetically speaking, Trump loses this current appeal. Oral arguments are coming up tomorrow. We're going to cover those. Be sure that you're subscribed. Oral arguments on this. Let's say court rules against Trump. Trump says, okay, I want the full panel of the entire court. They reject that. Trump says, okay, I'm going to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court says rejected. That could happen pretty quick. I don't think it's going to, but it could. And if it does, maybe Chutkan says, well, Trump, you had all of this motions, you had all of these discoveries. Yes, they were sitting in your front yard, but you should have read them. And he would say, well, I couldn't have read them or something, something like that. Now here, Jack Smith says, that was my plan. And because the court's subsequent stay order did not forbid this, like you didn't say I couldn't do this, the government did what we said we were going to do. On December 17th, we gave Trump additional discovery, dumped a wheelbarrow on there. December 18th, we disclosed a draft exhibit list. So not even the actual exhibit list, a draft. And on December 27th, we also, the government, filed a motion in limine that we read to exclude certain impermissible evidence. My friends, does that sound like a burden of litigation? Like if you're saying you're on vacation from this case, which you are, you don't have to do anything on it, theoretically, because you're in the Court of Appeals, and somebody keeps sending you emails, okay, you're on vacation, you have do not disturb on your inbox, and deranged Jack, who's completely illegitimate, according to ADMITS, former AG, says, hey Rob, just a notice, here's some more discovery in the middle on day 1 of vacation. Can you believe that? On day 2, they say, oh, here's a draft exhibit list. You say, what the heck, bro? I'm on vacation. You got my autoresponder yesterday. What are you doing? And then again, then he sends in a big substantive motion a week later. A motion in limine. It's like 15 pages. You're like, all right, that's it. We're not friends anymore. So the government steps impose no requirements on Trump. He doesn't have to do anything. He's made clear. He says, I'm not reviewing the discovery. I'm not reviewing the list. He says, Trump's people said this, and this is exactly what I loved about it. We do not accept the productions, and we are not going to review them. So you can send it over, but you're going to have to send it again. And the government has noted that it is not obliged to respond to the motion in limine at this time. So Trump doesn't have to respond right now. So we can file stuff and you don't have to respond. And because the government's actions require no response from Trump, which is not the standard, okay? You see that standard here? This is what these sneaky prosecutors do. That's not what Chutkan said. Chutkan didn't issue an order that says, you can do whatever you want as long as Trump is not required to respond. Wrong. It says no additional burdens of litigation. Not this standard. Like they know what they're doing here. Because he doesn't respond, it doesn't advance the trial or impose burdens of litigation on the defendant. You have to read the stuff. That's a burden, idiots. And thus do not violate the stay order. Like this is just dumb. And they know better than this. If Chutkan accepts this, like, I mean, come on. If somebody sends you an email and they say that's not a burden on you, what do you think? You have to open it, look at it, and read it? Yeah, it is. The fact that you don't have to respond to it doesn't mean anything. Now, the defendant's argument to the contrary, Trump, it misses the word called requiring additional discovery or briefing. And that would be different to the automatic stay, but nothing here requires any action by Trump. And so Trump fails to explain how mere receipt of discovery that he's not obligated to review, or the early filing of government pleadings to which he does not yet need to respond, how it possibly burdens him. You have to read it. That's the point. So we're not reading it. So stop even bothering us. Okay. The mere fact that we have to even look at it is a burden. You're not allowed to send the emails. Don't file the documents because I have to look at it. You understand that? If you're doing something, Jack, that means I have to analyze it. You don't get to just prosecute your case on your own with Judge Chutkan, you two skipping around the dewy meadows, cavorting about insurrections. If you file something, I got to know what you're doing and I got to read it to see that you're not doing sneaky garbage like you're doing. We're watching him. So now you expect Trump to just not do anything in the case and you just file a bunch of garbage? No, that is a dereliction of duty. The attorney has a responsibility to their client to make sure that this docket is not being mucked up by Jack Smith. And these prosecutors know that too. So they're just dishonest, okay? They're not good people. Like you can see it in the writing. The defendant falsely, they say, paints the government's voluntary compliance with the motion as an effort to spread political talking points, which is all true. And this is right, to try him in absentia. Not so. They say that his misconduct allegation, to which the government has responded in our selective and vindictive motion, is baseless. They say it's baseless, and so it merits no further response. They don't even care. They're not even going to respond to it. The motion already addresses it, and Trump's going to raise this stuff up at trial. And what's so infuriating about this is that this isn't Judge Chutkan's courtroom, okay? So it's a rigged jurisdiction. Now, the court has held that there is a substantial public interest, Chutkan writing, in the fair and prompt resolution of this case. And that's why the government intends to comply with its continuing discovery obligations and to voluntarily satisfy the remaining deadlines in the pretrial order. And they're going to just keep going. They're going to keep disclosing the witness list on February 19th. And they're not expecting any additional burdens on Trump at all. This will position the parties in the court when the mandate is returned to resume the pretrial schedule. Gosh, they're the worst, man. These prosecutors make my blood boil. Trump's motion for an order to show cause should be denied by the snakiest of the snakes, man, Thomas Wyndham. Like, they're not idiots, okay? He knows what he's doing in here. This is like a child who's behaving badly. And like, they know they're behaving badly. You know, everybody knows they're behaving badly, but he knows that the parent is in on it. Parent's like cool with it, super fine with it, because Judge Chutkan is. So this is the type of technical procedural stuff that's just like, you know better. They know better, and they're doing it because they're spiteful, they're cheaters, and they're liars, okay? They just make stuff up. They don't really care about about the actual law. Justice? Give me a break. It's not the Department of Justice. It's the Department of Jokers. All right, now, one of the people who made his whole career at the DOJ and now has his whole career being adverse to Donald Trump, literally, has an anti-Trump podcast, shows up hanging out with Inside Jen Psaki on MSNBC's hit show, and Trump called him out, says, you know, all this going on, crooked Joe Biden and the radical left Democrats, together with their minions in the DOJ, are coming after me, that moron's political opponent, like never before in the history of the USA. Crooked Joe is a threat to democracy. They are setting a horrible precedent for the future of our country. Deranged Jack and Lisa, Monaco. Is it a 6-year statute of limitations or just 5 years? Ask your slimeball boss, Andrew Weissmann, what your next move will be. Does crooked Joe Biden know or understand what you are doing to our failing nation? This is election interference. And so Andrew Weissmann went on MSNBC, joined Inside Jen Psaki, where they had a conversation about MSNBC type stuff. And this is what it sounded like when Andrew Weissmann was responding to Donald Trump. Psaki says, Donald Trump called you out. This is going to be great for your Twitter account. What do you have to say about this, Andy?
Can't let you go without asking you, because I'm sure you saw that the former president called you Jack Smith's slimeball boss. Anyone who knows you thinks that's insane, or anyone who watches you. I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to that.
Sure. I don't think there's anything that I can say that hasn't just been better said by the Maine Secretary of State about these kinds of ad hominem attacks. I would sort of separate that into two things. One is the sort of use of adjectives and adverbs. That is not legal argument. That is not a factual argument any more than if you say...
Like what? Danger to democracy? Insurrectionists? We're going to be dealing with the end of America? Like all that type of stuff? It's all platitudes. It's all just nonsense, right?
The election was stolen. You need to have facts.
Yeah.
Adjectives and adverbs is not a way of arguing, especially for someone who had been the leader of the free world, let alone anyone else. And I think that's really important. On the substance, which is to suggest that somehow I am Jack Smith's boss, again, where are the facts of that? I have had zero communications with Jack Smith or his team. They are independent, both within the Department of Justice and certainly for a legal analyst on MSNBC.
Okay, so I'm sure that there is no conversation there. I probably believe that. I don't know that they have direct communication with each other, but look at these two little smirks here. Look at these two little lovebirds, man. They really love these segments together for some reason. I don't know what's going on there. But anyways, they're always having these conversations, and Weissmann is responding to Trump. He's using bad language. It's like, do you know what network you're on? They just call names all day. That's their entire show. Is Donald Trump is an insurrectionist. Donald Trump is Hitler. Donald Trump's a death to democracy. Blah, blah, blah. It's nonstop. In fact, here's one guy who was over there on CNN. He says a lot of the same stuff. I regard him as a threat to democracy. By how? By what? By causing an insurrection. Okay, and then what does that mean? By interfering with the peaceful transfer of power. You say, well, what does that mean? They're like a broken record.
But since today is January 6th, 3 years after the attack on the Capitol, I'm just curious, Mr. Secretary, do you view Donald Trump as a threat to American democracy?
It is a tragic day in our nation's history. And yes, I do regard him as a threat to democracy. Democracy as we know it, our institutions, our political culture, all those things that make America great and have defined us as, you know, the oldest democracy on this planet.
But since...
Okay, so just a bunch of dumb platitudes, right? That's all it is. So Andrew Weissmann and Mark Esper and the rest of them, they just keep on the litany. Now we'll listen to these two real quick, Raskin and Schiff. Now they're pushing some interesting new arguments came in from Raskin, and I wanted to share this with you. Raskin is now trying to impute motive to Trump. So now he's saying that Trump caused one of the dates of one of the protesters to change. He said, don't go protest on the 20th during the inauguration, come back and protest during January 6th. And Raskin is going to say that is evidence of motive, right? That is indicia of a guilty mind, a guilty mens rea.
Just a mere riot, Donald Trump would not have gotten the Women for America First to change the permit for their protest from January 20th, where they were planning to protest at President Biden's inauguration, to January 6th. He told them it wasn't over yet. He was the one who, for the first time in American history...
Because it wasn't over yet. They were still counting, and there was going to be challenges to the vote. So it was not over yet. So that's all true. And what does that have to do with anything? I mean, did he send the women group to go in and seize power?
Went out as a president and galvanized protest at the peaceful transfer of power at exactly that time at 1 p.m. So it's very hard to see this as a rally that got out of hand, just a mere riot, the kind of thing that happens every now and then. It was targeted for a very strategic political purpose at Congress, at the peaceful transfer of power.
Now, they keep saying that phrase. You know, you hear that phrase a lot. And I ask myself, where does that phrase come from? You know, they just kind of inserted it into the 14th Amendment. It's like insurrection and the peaceful transfer of power. They need some other magnifier to make this this thing actually matter. And so rather than calling it a riot, it's got to be a riot. It's got to be an insurrection because of the peaceful transfer of powers. It's like indicia that they're looking for to just add in. It's an ingredient that they have to add into the pot. And so now you can see they're going to try to move dates around. So Trump said, come protest on this day. Therefore, that is insurrection on January 6th. And I still don't really know what their end theory is on this. Like, what was going to happen with the riot? And I mean this genuine. Like, was the podium guy, the lectern guy, going to take the lectern and that was it? What was going to be the end of the peaceful transfer of power in their minds that led to Trump running the country? You know, I still haven't heard them articulate that. So like the riot leads to a bunch of dead senators and then Trump just installs himself or something. Like, I don't know where it was going to go, but maybe they'll explain it to us one time. But as this goes up to the Supreme Court, we've got Shifty Schiff saying Clarence Thomas needs to recuse himself, needs to get off this case, because this is ultimately where a lot of this is going to end up. Okay, even the Jack Smith case, immunity, double jeopardy, maybe even this appeal stuff, and whether they continue the case during the appeal, maybe that'll go up on appeal. And we've got a lot of stuff to appeal here. I think it's all going to end up at the Supreme Court until we get some clarity on it. This is where the new battleground will be, because you already see the Democrats are circling the wagons to try to criticize and condemn SCOTUS, in particular Clarence Thomas, which is extremely racist.
Well, I have to say, if you're skeptical about this court, there's good reason to be skeptical. They've shown they're not a conservative court. They're not a court that feels bound by precedent. They're a reactionary court. They're a partisan court. And here, one of the justices in particular, the one you mentioned, Justice Thomas, has a very personal, close family member, a spouse, who had a role in trying to overturn the election. There is unquestionably a conflict here and an appearance of impropriety should he sit on that case. But I have to say, I expect that's what he'll do, because he doesn't seem particularly concerned about avoiding conflicts of interest, the appearance of conflicts of interest. Neither does Alito. And so there is, I think, room for concern and skepticism. The Constitution here is very clear. Well, I have to say, if you're skeptical
want him
about
gone no matter what. Clarence Thomas, they'd like to get him off, appoint someone else. You heard him also say Alito in there too, right? So it's not just Thomas. They don't like the court because they are not in charge of it. And so that's going to be the new line of attack from Shifty Schiff as the Jack Smith case continues to evolve and work its way up to the Supreme Court, I think is where it's going to land. We're going to be here continuing to cover, my friends. Thank you for liking this video. Thank you for subscribing wherever you're watching it. And thanks for checking out robertgovea.com. We've got all of the PDFs are uploaded there. All of the mind maps are accessible there. You can sign up for our daily newsletter. So all of these segments are just bundled up and delivered to your inbox at robertgovea.com. We'll look forward to seeing you there and back here on the next one.